On the phone line with me right now, it is Frank Zappa.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay.
You're on 98.9 KDBK. We want to welcome you to our airwaves.
Well, thank you.
And my name is Mimi Chen, and I've been a big fan of yours for years, so it's definitely my thrill and my pleasure to have you on my show.
My pleasure.
Well, we've been getting so many phone calls, even from people from the East Coast who've been wanting to talk to you and give you questions. I have a whole load of them. We may not be getting to all of them tonight. It all depends on your time, obviously. I would love to have you on as long as you're able to talk.
Well, let's just see how it goes.
Okay. There's a lot of political questions that people are asking. Your album covers have for years carried reminders to register to vote, and you've talked a lot about politics. What do you think about, say, Albert Gore, Tipper Gore?
Well, a lot of times in the press they try and make it like Tipper Gore is my arch enemy, and as a matter of fact, she's not. I don't want to be put in the position of having to say kind things about them because I'm politically not too enthusiastic about what they stand for, but I don't have any personal grudge against either of them. I think that the tag that has been placed on Bill Clinton, the Slick Willie tag, probably applies equally to Slick Albert.
What about Dan Quayle? I had to ask that one.
I mean, that's kind of like a biology question. We're talking about a subhuman species here about which little is known.
Well, we're just trying to figure out what you think about some of the races going around, especially in California.
Well, I just saw an interesting thing on CalSpan. I don't know whether anybody ever watches that. There's C-SPAN 1 and C-SPAN 2, and then there's also this channel called CalSpan that'll let you watch the legislators in Sacramento busily at work spending your dollars. And I guess about 10 days ago, I started watching this to see what they were doing about the budget crisis, and it really is kind of rampant buffoonery going on up there. They can't figure out what to do about producing a real budget for the state of California without slashing education and everything else. And today I tuned in and expected to see a budget argument, and instead they were trying to decide a bill regarding the penalties for spousal rape. And it appears that they passed 24-2 a resolution that all penalties that would apply to normal rape will now apply to spousal rape. So there's a news flash for you.
Wow, they finally just decided that, huh?
Yeah. Well, that's going to be a real boon for California lawyers.
Yeah, definitely another...
The courts are going to be filled up with cases like that. Anytime a little argument breaks out between a husband and a wife, you can just see mommy dashing down to the nearest TV lawyer to file a spousal rape charge against the husband.
It's going to be an interesting one. Do you spend a lot of time watching C-SPAN? Is that the only thing you watch?
No, I flip around on the news. Like right now, as we speak, I am taping 2020 because there's a story on about this mystery disease that has afflicted the soldiers who went to fight in the Gulf War. They've all got some... Well, not all of them, but a number of them have come back with some unknown disease, and I've got the video cassette running so that I can look at that after I'm done with this radio interview.
Speaking about you were talking about the budget. In your book, you call yourself a fiscal conservative, and you outlined an entire tax plan, much more thought out than Jerry Brown's. Are you still thinking tax plans nowadays?
Well, I'm so disgusted with what has happened in the last year in terms of the activities of the federal government. I've come to the conclusion that the concept of a federal government for the United States has probably outlived its usefulness. And the way I look at it, if you have a government which is supposed to take care of the machinery that would hold a nation this size together. And if that device, the government, the federal government itself, has failed to perform that function, then you either have to replace the machine or replace some of the parts or just junk the machine and try something else that works, because it seems to me that every tax dollar that gets sent to Washington, D.C. Brings no benefit to the people who are paying the bill. There was one of the shows that I saw on C-SPAN recently was a lecture given by this guy named Peter Grace, who is the author of the Grace Report, and by his statistics, which he claims to have derived from published government estimates, that out of every tax dollar, only 4 cents of the dollar actually goes to provide the goods and services that the taxpayer thinks he's getting when he sends his money in there. So my current recommendation is that people ought to reevaluate whether or not they want to have a federal government. If a tax dollar is going to be collected, it should be spent at the state and local level where you can see what it's being spent for instead of just shipping it away to the black hole. And as far as the traditional institutions of American government, like the House of Representatives and the Senate, I think they should be maintained for entertainment purposes only. I think that instead of sending people there who claim to be legislators, since we've seemed to have run out of them, and statesmen, we ran out of them a long time ago, we basically have these stand-up comics. If you've ever watched the proceedings on C-SPAN, these people... well, they're actually kind of failed comics, because if they were good comics, they would be on the Comedy Network. But I would suggest maintaining the Congress just for entertainment purposes, and when you vote for a congressman or senator, you send him there based on his potential entertainment value, and then leave these historic buildings open to the public so that you can walk in and yell at them and throw things at them, and just behave like you're in a comedy club rather than being forced to take their idiocy in a serious way.
Well, it sounds like you're pretty fed up with the federal government as it stands. Would you have supported, say, Ross Perot if he had been a viable candidate?
Well, two things on Ross Perot. One, when he first was campaigning, I thought, well, this is interesting. Because some of the things that he said I agreed with, and one of the biggest criticisms that people had of Ross Perot was he didn't have any answers for the things that he said were wrong with the country. But one of the good things about Ross Perot is at least he was saying what was wrong, and all you were getting from the other guys was happy talk. Now, there was a news story on CBS Network News tonight that said that Ross Perot has just quietly refiled some of the papers that would be required to keep him on the ballot, and I think it's Nevada. And by the end of the month, they expect that his name actually will be on the ballot in all 50 states. And it also seems to me that the reason that he dropped out was either a strategy so that he could re-enter, or he got a call from the same Republican slime machine that made that Bill Clinton spot that had the audio tape of Jennifer Flowers. Are you aware of that? Yeah, the 900 number. They probably called him up and said, hey, Ross, listen to this.
They can edit something and to make him look equally ridiculous.
Yeah, it just seems to me that the way in which he bowed out was pretty uncharacteristic of the kind of a guy that you'd been seeing on the news all along. It was like, whoops, I'm out of here. But
well, he could be waiting for the two to duke it out, and then all the mud was slung, and then he could re-enter the race, huh?
Well, the interesting thing about his withdrawal from the race is it's not a complete and total withdrawal. If his name is still going to be on the ballot and in all 50 states, he's at least mechanically positioned so that those who would choose to vote for him would be able to, and it would still be a legitimate thing to do. but there was so much distress among his followers at the point that he bowed out. They really felt abandoned and cheated and hoodwinked and everything, and I don't know whether he can really pick up the momentum if he decides to jump back in.
Well, just last week on a street in Berkeley, I saw they're still selling Zappa for President bumper stickers.
They'll sell anything, won't they?
Well, are you still in the race, Frank?
No, my health would preclude me from doing anything like that.
And obviously, your health is a big question that everybody's been asking.
Well, I have good days and I have bad days, but, I do my best to keep working and trying to keep fighting to get this crap out of my system.
How is the battle?
Well, I don't want to get technical.
Oh, okay.
I'll just say that some days I feel better than others. Right now I feel okay.
Okay. We understand, you've given a lot of musicians a break in the past, long before they became well-known, people like Steve Vai. How did you get to find these people, and what is it like working with them?
Well, the situations are all different. I mean, some of them send me letters or tapes, or I hear about them from some other people, but usually there's no chance for them to work with me unless I'm putting a band together and holding auditions. That's usually the way that the process gets started. If I have an operational band and one guy decides he's going to leave for some reason or other, or he gets fired and needs to be replaced, we would usually hold auditions.
We understand you're pretty fed up with touring. Is there any chance that you would just get a band together to play maybe one gig somewhere?
Well, my standards of quality are really pretty high for a rock and roll band, and in order to have one that I think is worth putting on a stage, you've got to invest a lot of time for the rehearsal, a minimum of 2 months, and preferably 3 or 4 months to put together a really first-class band. And after you've invested that kind of time and money, it would have to be one hell of a concert just to even break even. So I don't think that there's any chance of something like that. But I am doing this classical concert series in Germany this year. And I'll be going over there September 1st. I'll probably be in Europe for the whole month of September. And they're making a television show out of it, and we'll be making a CD out of it. I doubt whether the television show will ever be seen in the United States, but...
You never know.
Well, that's one thing I think we can safely bet on. But...
So are you working on more serious music as opposed to rock and roll?
Yeah, I haven't written anything rock and roll for years, and most of what I've been doing for the last year is working with this group called the Ensemble Moderne, which is a chamber orchestra of young musicians from Frankfurt that are... Everybody in the band is a virtuoso. It's like a whole bunch of classical Steve Vais on all different instruments, and I've been writing a whole evening's worth of music for them.
What prompted the shift from rock and roll to more serious venues?
It just seemed that it wasn't practical for me to tour anymore. And if you're just... it wasn't attractive to me to write rock and roll material and just record it in the studio and then be done with it. For me, if you're going to play that kind of music, there should have some live aspect to it, and most of the material that I've written in that vein is material that develops as the result of having come in contact with human musicians. And if there's no budget to deal with human musicians, instead of budgets for machines and software and so forth, then you have to find another medium for your expression.
Do you still work with the Synclavier?
Yes.
You'll probably go down as one of our earlier serious digital composers.
Well, one thing's sure, I will go down.
Where do you draw the humor line when it comes to music? I mean, you have all instrumental works like Jazz from Hell, but more subtle than the famous lyrics.
Well, I think there's lots of stuff to laugh at in terms of pictures, in terms of individual sounds, groups of sounds, musical sounds accompanying lyrics, individual words and lyrics, individual pronunciations of words. You can have humor at all different levels, and just because you don't have lyrics doesn't mean you can't have a sense of humor in what you do.
What happened to Cal Schenkel? He did the artwork on your albums for years.
He lives in Pennsylvania, and he still continues to do artwork for me. We just did a Japanese repackaging of the Best Band You Never Heard CD, and he did the package for that.
Yeah, the greatest band you'll never hear had to be kind of a Spinal Tap story, huh?
Yeah, it was kind of Spinal Tap.
Do you still play any guitar? I heard somewhere that you weren't playing, really.
No, I haven't played it for years.
So it's pretty much you hire somebody else to do your work for you.
Well, most of what I'm doing now doesn't really require electric guitar. In the music that I'm writing for this group in Germany, there's a classical guitar player that's in the group, and also a classical mandolin player. It's an interesting orchestration. There's two harps, and one of them doubles keyboards, and then we have another keyboard player. 5 winds, 7 brass, 5 strings, 3 percussion, guitar, and mandolin. And they will do choreography, they will do mouth noises, they'll do anything you ask them to do. And
so it's almost very non-traditional sounding. I mean, they don't play their instruments a normal way.
Oh, they can do everything. They can play all different styles of music, and do it with a sense of humor. And they're very easy to get along with. And even though most of the musicians are German, the only one that really doesn't speak enough English where I can talk to her directly is one of the percussionists. Her name is Rumi, and she's Japanese, and she speaks German and Japanese, but very little English. So we have to go through a translator to communicate with her, but most of the other people in the group speak English.
Well, that must make for some interesting translations.
Yeah, sure does.
Well, we know you're fond of many different types of music. You're fond of old doo-wop, surf music, Charles Mingus, Edgar Varese, Eric Dolphy, Stravinsky. I could go on, but how about things like rap? Well,
some rap music I can appreciate just because I get as angry as they do about some of the same things that they're singing about. But the downside of rap is that the texture of it and the final result of what is done tends to resemble the final result of what is done from the other guy's record. It's the sameness of it that doesn't amuse me very much. But I think that I can identify very strongly with some of the ideas that are expressed in some of the more belligerent lyrics.
All you have to do is turn on C-SPAN, huh?
Yeah, well, I can't imagine that any of these rappers ever do turn on C-SPAN, but if they did, boy, could they get some material, because it's so hilarious. We've got all these people that are in the government, and you watch them talk, and there's only a handful of them that can actually put a complete sentence together in the English language. And some of these people have the nerve to complain about rap artists, with some of the most clever lyrics that you're going to hear, and they could never, these same dorks could never stand in the well of the House of Representatives and make a speech that made as much sense.
What'd you think about the Ice-T controversy?
Well, I don't really know. I met Ice-T a couple of years ago, and seemed like a nice guy. But it seems like whenever there's a little rap tempest in a teapot, and there's a major record company involved, you also notice that CNN gets right on it. And in this case, the record company is Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers owns 20% of CNN. And, there may be some element of real controversy, but I also think that there is another element of real merchandising involved there, too.
Yeah, he did kind of make out like a bandit when he announced he was going to take it off.
Well, if the CD, he was going to give away the single, but obviously the album is still for sale.
All right. Speaking about Warner's, you used to be on Warner's a long time ago.
Yeah, that's why I don't have any respect for Warner's. I had to sue them.
Oh, I was just about to ask about the switch over to your own record company.
Well, I wish it would have happened sooner. It would have saved me a lot of money in court. But I wouldn't be too surprised if over the next few years, especially when another style of music other than rap takes over as the focus of the airwaves, that you start hearing about lawsuits of some of these groups going after the record companies.
This is 98.9 KDBK. I'm sitting here talking with Frank Zappa. Back to your affection for all sorts of different types of music. What do you think about New Age?
New Age music?
Yeah.
Oh, it's kind of like listening to mucus.
How about a composer like John Cage, who just passed away? He's kind of an interesting composer.
Well, what I said in a press conference in Germany a few weeks ago is that anybody who's working in an improvisational medium in terms of classical music certainly has to bow their head to him, because he was the granddaddy of improvising on absolute nothingness. He could make a piece out of dust, and often did. And
he's the one who composed work on silence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the I Ching.
Yeah, he's a really very interesting man, and interesting, not just a composer, but a musical philosopher. And the impact of his musical thinking has gone in a lot of different directions, even though you probably won't hear a lot of composers imitating the sound of his music. The spirit of the type of allowance for chance in the music has influenced a number of composers. In fact, he was in this concert series in Germany. He was supposed to have a week of his music performed over there. It's a month-long festival, and there was a week of Stockhausen, a week of Cage, a week of my music, and then another week of assorted other composers. And it was supposed to be a celebration of his 80th birthday. And the ensemble, Modern, some of the members of it, were going to be performing on some of those pieces. So I imagine they're kind of upset about him passing away.
Well, that must be a trip for you to find yourself ranked among all the composers you just named, Stockhausen and John Cage.
Well, it's, it would seem absurd in the United States, but I guess it doesn't seem absurd in Germany, so I don't know what that tells you about Germans.
Or what that tells you about Americans.
Well, we don't like to talk about them too much.
Now, you're always on the cutting edge of something. We go back to some of your earlier stuff, like was Freak Out the first double album?
As far as I know, first rock and roll double album. I mean, they had opera boxes before that.
And how you got signed is a funny story.
Well, you mean because the producer thought we were a white blues band? Well, accidents will happen.
Going to 200 Motels, that was shot using an advanced video technique.
Yeah, the 200 Motels film was the first feature-length film to be shot on videotape and then transferred to 35 millimeter. And it was an experimental technology at the time it was done. It was shot in 1970. And the video director, Tony Palmer, had already done some experiments in a shorter form. He made a film on the Cream, a live concert of the Cream using this technique. But there had never been an attempt to, we'll have to say, shoot a dramatic film, and a film that was scripted where you would shoot individual scenes and then assemble them later. There had never been an attempt to do anything like that using this technique. And one of the things that was interesting about 200 Motels is United Artists put up the money for the project. The whole film cost $679,000. And if they had tried to shoot it on film, try to do a musical like that on film, probably would have cost $5 million or $10 million even at that time, just because of all the optical effects that were in it. But they didn't believe in it. They thought it was just, some stupid thing that they were tricked into doing. And even though we were shooting it in a studio in England, when we got a little bit behind schedule, they said, no, we're not going to give you any more money or any more time to finish it off. You have exactly 7 8-hour days, and then you're out of there. And at the end of those 7 days, we had shot 1/3 of this script, which looked like a baby phone book. And the real story of the script was never shot. We only had parts of the story, so I had to go into the editing room, which in those days didn't resemble the kind of video editing suites that you have now, where you get to sit down and there's, it's a nice, comfortable environment, and there's all this computerized stuff to control the machines. It was all manual, and you had to do it in this room with no chairs, standing up in the same room with all of the record machines, which have to be kept at about 45 degrees. So it's like working in an icebox. And a story had to be made out of all those parts that had been shot, even though they didn't have the complete continuity. So it's a miracle that there ever was a 200 Motels.
What was it like using that huge symphony orchestra?
Oh, they were pretty uncooperative. I mean, they were just, just a bunch of guys who hated their lives.
Did you ever actually try conducting an orchestra?
Yeah, I've conducted before. I conducted the London Symphony Orchestra at a live concert in, I think it was 83. And I've conducted in San Francisco. I conducted a chamber, I think it was the San Francisco Chamber Orchestra in 2 pieces by Varese. That was really hard. That was, it's one thing to conduct your own music, but it's very difficult to do somebody else's. And I'd never tried it before, and I just did it because I thought it was quite a challenge to do it. I still have a little bootleg cassette of that.
I remember you found a composer that has a name similar to yourself.
Yeah, there's a guy named Francesco Zappa who was alive at the same time as Mozart, who wrote mostly string trios. And, people think that I made it up, but it's real. He's in the book. And so we did some research and found the actual scores of some of these trios. A few of them were in the Berkeley Library, some were in Berlin, some were in a library in The Hague. And we got photostats of all this early music, and my computer assistant at the time, a guy named David Ocker, typed all these pieces into the synclavier, and we released an album of these pieces. You
plan to release any more of Francesco Zappa?
Well, he didn't write that much. There's not that much available.
Oh, okay. I believe you've used some other composers to conduct some of your works, like Zubin Mehta, Kent Nagano. What was it like using them or working with them?
Well, I would say that working with Zubin Mehta was kind of humorous, and I actually had a much better time working with Kent Nagano. He conducted the 2 London Symphony Orchestra albums, and also conducted the world premiere of a ballet I wrote called Sinister Footwear, which was done in Berkeley.
Well, Kent is well known in Berkeley, that's for sure.
And he also, I guess it was 2 years ago, they did a performance in, he now conducts in Lyon, France. And the orchestra and ballet company in Lyon did an evening of some of my other ballet music there. And the ballet company from Lyon has decided to take this dance that they did to my music on the road. But they're just going to be dancing to tape, though. And I believe they're coming to the United States with it, but I don't know when.
Now, you touched briefly on Zubin Mehta. You said that was a humorous encounter. What was so humorous about it?
Well, I don't think that he really took anything that I wrote that seriously. And one of since the economics of doing any kind of classical music in Hollywood are really pretty dire because of the union situation here, there was very little time for rehearsal. And to save time during the rehearsal, there was one of the pieces that we were doing at this concert that had a repeated section. And he just decided to take it out. He just dog-eared about 7 or 8 pages in the score and just X'd it out and told the musicians not to play it. And he'd made some comments, later on about how he was editing my music.
That must have not felt very good to have your music kind of edited.
Well, the real joke about dealing with the Los Angeles Philharmonic was when that concert occurred in '69, it was at the Pauley Pavilion, a basketball place at UCLA. And they had about 14,000 people show up for it, so it was one of the LA Philharmonic's best attended shows that season. So after the concert was over, the Philharmonic management came to me and offered me the opportunity to write a concerto for 2 pianos, which the LA Philharmonic would be happy to premiere. All I'd have to do is buy them 2 brand new Bosendorfer Imperial pianos to play it on.
And how much do those cost? About 80 grand? Or?
No, they're about $100,000 a piece.
Oof.
And so I haven't spoken to anybody in the Los Angeles Philharmonic since that time.
That's a pretty heavy-duty demand.
Yeah, I would say that's fairly arrogant.
Yeah. We have a quote from you from Roxy and Elsewhere, 1975. Jazz is not dead, it only smells funny. What do you mean by that?
Well, there was a time when jazz had its own atmosphere. And it was pretty easy to differentiate jazz from other forms of music, not only by the clothes the jazz musicians wore, but by what the music sounded like and the reasons why they played it and what was going on in the music. But as we moved more into the season of corporate rock, there began to spring up, the corporate rock was developed during the 70s, there began to spring up this other kind of jazz, which sounded like Weasley rock and roll with solos in it.
Should I say fusion?
Well, fusion wasn't all that Weasley. I mean, but that was kind of boring because everybody played the same thing at the same time as fast as they could. That would be like the jazz answer to speed metal. But there were just kind of disco-ish, pseudo-synthesizer jazz tunes coming out and radio stations that would play hours of stuff that really wasn't very interesting. It was all kind of pentatonic scales, and it had a jazz bow attitude, but it wasn't as convincing as a good rock and roll record. And so, to me, it just smelled funny.
Well, you mentioned speed metal. What are your feelings about that kind of genre?
I think that in every form of music, there are people who do it right and who do it great, and then there are people who imitate them. And let's see, there was one speed metal group that I saw on MTV. I think it's Megadeth. Well, I thought the guitar players in it were really good.
All right. The Megadeth is very closely related to Metallica, because Dave Mustaine used to play. I can't remember
whether it was Megadeth or Metallica. I don't even know the name of the song, but I was just astonished at how interesting the guitar solo was in the thing, because it wasn't just the same old noodling around. The guy was really playing some interesting notes. He had good technique, and there was some real attitude there. And I think I wasn't paying any attention to the lyrics, but musically, I thought that I had heard something creative by the time it was over. But I don't stay glued to MTV, so I couldn't really tell you what it was.
Speaking about bands, there's a local band here in the Bay Area called Kaka, which does Frank Zappa tunes. Have you heard of them?
No.
Were there a lot of bands who play your music?
Well, there are a few. There was one group, I can't remember their name. They sent me I think they're called Barf. They sent me their song list and their promo material, which had a photograph of a guy kind of, vomiting a vast amount. He's sitting on some steps and, just vomiting all over himself. And there are some groups in Europe that don't play my material, but claim to be in the same vein as the early Mothers of Invention. I got a video cassette from a group from Austria that's in that kind of style, and there have been a couple groups in Czechoslovakia. But usually, and there's another group in Sweden that was called Zapstitute.
How does it feel to have, people imitating?
Oh, wait, and there's another one from Brazil called the Central Scrutinizer Band that sent me a videotape. I could not believe it. They did a concert for my 50th birthday, even though I wasn't there. It was a full 2-hour concert. They had 2 hours of this wide range of material, everything from titties and beer to the jazz discharge party hats. And they had 2 guitar players in this group. I guess it was about an 8 or 10-piece group. And they were playing the solos off the record. And,
did they
when
do a
something
good
like
job?
that arrives in the mail, it just kind of makes your eyebrows hit the ceiling.
Were they able to, handle the solos?
They were pretty close. I mean, the main drawback to that particular group was it seemed that the keyboard player couldn't really figure out the chord changes all the time, but the spirit of the show was there. They were trying to do the show the same way we did, with no spaces between the songs, so it was like a non-stop 2-hour blast of material. And I'm sure that they didn't understand all the lyrics and were rendering the things phonetically, and that was kind of funny. But there are some people out there who like what I do.
When you went to remaster some of your early albums for the CD, you found some of the tapes disintegrating. You had to use some clever tricks to get it going again. Are the original mixes gone?
No, they still exist, but as I said before in interviews, that the original 2-track masters for Rolling in It for the Money and for Lumpy Gravy, the oxide was falling off the tape. So the masters, in the case of Rolling in It for the Money, there were multi-track masters that were mixed down, so I was able to reconstitute that material. But the masters for Lumpy Gravy, which were 4-track, have vanished. Nobody knows where they are.
Ooh, the case
so all
of the
that
missing
remains
masters.
of Lumpy Gravy is those 2-track tapes that are falling apart.
How's your family, by the way? Dweezil, Moon?
Oh, they're great. Dweezil just spent 4 months in Japan.
How do you feel about him kind of following your footsteps in music?
No, I don't think he really is.
Oh.
He's going into music, but he's certainly not doing the kinds of things that I did, or going in the same direction, and he really shouldn't.
Right.
But let's see, he got a new guitar today, and Diva got a new haircut today, and Amit, Diva, and Moon and Dweezil, and my wife are all at the movies right now.
At the movies? What are you watching?
No, well, I don't know what they went to see. They went out to dinner and then went to the movies, because there was nothing going on around the house. It was just me doing a phone interview, so.
You had a cameo appearance in a Monkees movie. That was Head, I believe.
Yeah, that was about 2,000 years ago. They had just invented film then.
I was just wondering, if you ever, want to go into movies or anything like that.
Occasionally I get offers to play roles in films, and I usually turn them down. I did that one just because it was so stupid, and it was only a day's work. But I've had offers to do real roles on location, and usually to play either demonic characters or loser, beat-up, old hippie remnant from the 60s kind of degenerate type things. And obviously I just wasn't enthusiastic about doing that.
Well, I have a question here from a gentleman from Stamford, Connecticut. he called here and he's pleaded for us to ask this question. And I'm not quite sure where it's from. It says, where is the conceptual continuity clue in The Perfect Stranger?
The doorbell.
Then we have our answer for Mike Genovese. All right, the doorbell. I'm writing it down now. And
the doorbell at the beginning of Perfect Stranger is the same as the doorbell at the end of Pedro's Dowry.
Okay. I have to ask my producer, Alan, was there any other questions that people had? Oh, you see, we have a problem with the phone system. We can't really patch some of the people who are trying to call in to ask you questions, unfortunately.
So you have to intermediate?
Well, we can't even do that, because if we cut you off, I mean, if we try to answer the other phones, we cut you off, which I think would upset us terribly. So, do you have any new releases coming up, aside from your work with the Ensemble Moderne?
Yeah, I'm gradually moving to completion on this album called Civilization Phase 3. The cover is done for that. It was done by an artist that I met in Moscow named Yuri Balashov. And it's a really great cover. But I can't do the final completion work on that album until after this whole German project is over with. I won't be able to get back to work on it until probably the middle of October or November. And then as soon as I've got the work done on the digital master, then it can come out.
Is this another serious project?
No, this the thing that's interesting about this, if you'll, for those in the audience who remember Lumpy Gravy, there's some talking parts in between the music. And that was recorded in 1967. A bunch of people stuck inside of a piano, just engaging in random conversation and dialogue that I was coaching along from the sidelines. And what I did was take all the rest of that dialogue from 1967. There's actually kind of a little story that's being told there. I took all the rest of that 1967 dialogue and used that as the continuity for an album which is 100% Synclavier.
Okay.
And the basic premise is these people all live inside of a giant grand piano because the world outside is not safe anymore. And it seemed to me that that's kind of the way it is.
We're at 98.9 KDBK. We're having our Friday Night Frank Fix here, as we do every Friday night at 10 o'clock. Unfortunately, you know, we are kind of running out of time because my show is supposed to be up in 10 minutes. And I did promise people I'd play a few tracks.
Okay. Well, let me say goodbye, and you play them some music. And what are you going to play tonight?
Well, we played something from Hot Rats, Peaches en Regalia, and then I guess we're going to play some stuff from the Grand Wazoo. Stuff from, what do you got there? Shut Up and Play Your Guitar.
Good. That's a pretty interesting blend of stuff.
Yeah, well, we try to keep it as interesting since your stuff is definitely interesting. I want to thank you so much for talking to us tonight.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do it. Remember, everybody, just think again about whether or not we really need a federal government.
And please, Frank, feel free to call us anytime that you have a moment to talk on our Friday night Frank Zappa features, because I'm sure that there's many of your fans here in the Bay Area, and they do want to keep up with what you are currently preoccupied with.
Well, maybe I'll talk to you again after I'm finished with this project in Germany.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
This is 98.9 KDBK.